we're working, because of that, we are going to be a few months behind, but at the end, I think the state is going to be better off, because through the joint effort of Caltrans and the High-Speed Rail Authority, bringing a UC Davis expertise into it and Cambridge Systematics, we tried to use additional resources to refine that model. And the models are going to continue to go through refinement, and they will be continuing to be tested against existing development. There's certain forecasting that was made for not only high-speed rail, but in the same model produces the ridership for BART and highways and others. So we can go back and test, see how accurate we were on those, and continue to calibrate those models where you could. That's the process. And it's going to be a process that the new model is going to take more than a year to develop. So we will not, at this business plan, we don't have any new model. We use the same old model to forecast the current numbers. It'd be another year or so before a new model is going to be used for the new forecasting, which will be more accurate than the current one. But will it be absolutely accurate? Probably not. It will go through additional refinement. At the end of the day, as the chairman pointed out, when the authority goes into a private investors and asks for a contract for the operation of the high-speed rail system, that contractor who's going to be entering into a contract with the state to provide service for a number of years and collect revenues, they're going to do their own investigation. They're going to create their own model and test ours and assess what they think the ridership is going to be before they bid on the project. So there will be some number of private entities who will also be looking at this based on their own assessment. And then finally comes the reality when you start opening the system, you find out how close you are.
Right. I have one question, though, that I still asked before, and it's just maybe very simple, maybe it's that when we started, and you mentioned it also, this was predicated that there would be no public sector guarantee, revenue guarantee, ongoing. And yet, in your own business plan, you're saying that for the private sector, and this is the part that makes me nervous, and I just want to know, it only makes me nervous, not in that, let's deal with the issue up front. Are you really saying that we have to have a guarantee for a private sector involvement? You're talking about somewhere around $12 billion in this system. Mm-hmm. That they have to obtain a minimal level of revenues guaranteed from the state. There has to be for them to get involved. How does that reconcile with what we have in our in statute and through the bond? How do we guarantee that when we said we will not guarantee that?
Mr. Chairman, there's a distinction between operating subsidy and the revenue guarantee. And let me see if I can draw that. The operating subsidy means that the annual cost of running the high-speed train will be less than the total fare revenues. In other words, at the end of the day, when you collect all the fares and you pay all the expenses, you have some cash left over.
Right.
That's a condition. Okay. Now, we are also going to a private sector asking for investment, and the investmenters may look at this and say, okay, you anticipate the $3 billion a year surplus. We are willing to take a risk of up to a $2 billion a year surplus. But for that additional $1 billion, we might want to have some kind of insurance, whether you call it revenue guarantee or whatever else it is. So our investors will be willing to spend the money based on the anticipation of the entire $3 billion. Not that you're going to have needing an operating subsidy, but the question is how much is going to be your operating surplus?
What if there's not a surplus at all?
That's a doomsday scenario. That's a doomsday scenario that one always have to consider.
That's what's happening in Great Britain. That's what's happening in Korea.
But at the same time, in this country today, a Acela train operated by Amtrak has an operating surplus today.
I sure hope so. I'm just
It does.
and I understand that, and
I
I'm
read
just
in the Wall Street
saying.
Journal, and that must be
So what
true.
you're
The
saying
Wall
is
Street Journal.
not to worry. There
No.
will never be any responsibility or risk on the part of the
Senator,
state.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that based on our best knowledge,
Yeah, let me-
that's
I
what's
just
going
need
to
to
be.
understand, what are you really saying?
Sure, well, but we're really saying is we have a plan with a proposal, we're seeking private participation, and when we do, before we take that next step in
Right.
terms of full operation, we will know what that is.
And if they ask for a dedicated revenue stream that meets at least some minimal amount, and if we can't generate that through the operation, who will make that up? Will you say you will never come and ask the
Well,
state?
we don't have, well, we have the ability to live within the law. We have the requirement to present this business plan. I can't write what a private sector at some moment in time is going to respond to our proposal.
Okay.
Therefore, our job and our duty is to ensure that you and the legislature and the people of California are informed at those stages. This is our best opportunity to present a plan at this moment with what we know, and to somehow contemplate that we will know that X amount of revenue is guaranteed at a certain point in time. We don't know that today. Just as
Let
you
me
and I...
interrupt for a moment, if I may,
Yeah, sure,
Pringle.
sure.
Senator Lowenthal, we may be getting a little ahead of ourselves with the Legislative Analyst Office, but I think that Senator Lowenthal's question goes to the
Yeah, but you're
language.
just as good. You can go ahead. You don't need that.
We're all doing the best we can. I feel sure of that. On page 8 of the Legislative Analyst Office, there's a specific reference to the revenue guarantee, and it says, and this was distributed at the Assembly hearing on Monday of last week, as I understand it. I'm reading now directly from the LAO's analysis. Revenue guarantee. The plan assumes some form of revenue guarantee from the public sector to attract private investment. The plan does not explain how the guarantee could be structured so as not to violate the law. I think that was the thrust of Senator Lowenthal's question, which is, as the LAO looks at the matter, we've got a plan that says in order to bring that private investment to the table, we're going to have to provide some guarantees that the success of the project is backed with public funds. The LAO's assessment of that, as I read the LAO's language, is that that's inconsistent with the law as it stands today. So the question is, how do you square the circle given that assessment by the Legislative Analyst's Office?
And I'm not even opposed to it. I'm just saying, I just want to be told up front what we're buying. That's all.
Well, Mr. Morshed did go into detail on that as to specifically what the LAO had referenced there. That is based upon an assumption that there would need to be that guarantee for private participation, and we don't have that knowledge at this moment in time if there would be.
No, I believe it's based on the LAO, and maybe the best way to do this is get the LAO up here a little ahead of schedule, Mr. Chairman. But I believe it's based on, as I read it, it's based on the LAO's assessment of what your plan that is before us today requires. Now, if there's a misunderstanding about what's in the plan by the LAO, this would be a great time to assuage everyone's concerns by identifying that misunderstanding. But as I look at the language from the LAO, it's pretty straightforward. The plan assumes some form of revenue guarantee from the public sector to attract private investment, period, end of sentence. The plan does not explain how the guarantee could be structured so as not to violate the law, period, end of sentence. So if we could get, Mr. Chairman, if you're agreeable, I think this would be a great time to ask the LAO's office to step up and rather than debate what we think they mean, make sure we're having a conversation about what they mean and what the basis for that conclusion might be.
Thank you, Senator Smitty. Eric Thronson with the LAO. We're referring to page 103 of the business plan when we're in this section, if you want to turn to it. I believe it's page 103. Well, it says it more than once in the business plan. So on page 103, it says, and I can read it, that implicit in these assumptions is some form of a revenue guarantee that would guarantee to private sector participants that a minimum level of revenues would be received. To us, that means that there would be a revenue guarantee requirement for private money to be brought in.
And that's the language on page 103?
103, at the bottom of 103, the very last part of it.
Got it.
To be fair, in our review, we're not saying that it isn't possible for some type of revenue guarantee to not be an operating subsidy. What we're referring to is the fact the business plan doesn't talk about how that might work.
Right.
And I think the question, though, that remains is if, in fact, there is a need for a revenue guarantee, is there a revenue guarantee that is allowed, that could be crafted, that is within state law and the present prescriptive nature of the restrictions we have on operating revenue?
Right.
And that's your question.
That's the
We
question.
believe there is, and therefore we owe you then further information on how that can be accomplished.
That's all we're asking.
All right? And we will endeavor to provide that to you.
And Mr. Pringle, as I'm sure you know, we're going to have another opportunity to have this conversation on Thursday of this week in Palo Alto, where we have a joint informational hearing again. I think you can expect that this question will be raised again at that time. If it weren't raised by the committee members, I think it's a pretty good guess it'll be raised by some of the local residents who are participating. And I think it would be useful. I'm not suggesting that you're going to have, 245 pages worth of guarantee language with an appendices, but I'm saying that I think it would be useful and appropriate at that time to have an answer that's a little bit more fully fleshed out than the one we're getting
Okay.
today.
We'll be glad to work on that, and I'll do my very best to have prepared the individual who will be there on our behalf to be able to present that.
And let me just restate it, and Senator Lowenthal, if you can, I know we're both fighting off colds here, so if you can just nod if I'm in the ballpark. I think what I heard the LAO say just now is when you read the language, it's pretty clear that a guarantee is anticipated. Now, maybe there's somebody who's going to guarantee this other than the public, but if so, who that might be is not at all clear. So I think we're left with the necessary conclusion that the guarantee is the public, contrary to existing law. If you got a Plan B, it would be helpful to share Plan B with us, because right now the LAO is telling us that he thinks we've got a problem.
Very
Fair
good.
enough.
And we will work it. I didn't hear him say there's a problem. I didn't hear him say there was a problem, though, no, I'm sorry, but
I heard him say
that he would like
and I
to
read the
understand
language.
that.
Hang on a second, Mr.
Yes.
I heard him say, and I read the language not once but twice, that says there's no indication how this can be done without violating the law. If he didn't call that a problem, I will.
Very good.
Okay, that's a
Therefore,
problem.
there's no indication how that can be done. Therefore, our job is to provide you ways in which that can be done and present that. And that's what I heard from the LAO.
And let me just take advantage of this opportunity. I was the frustration that occasionally creeps into my voice is I really do want you to be successful. And my experience, and I know I'm talking to someone with no small level of experience himself, my experience is that you're not successful if you try and shortcut the public process, that sometimes you have to go slow before you can go fast, and that if we don't answer these hard questions sooner rather than later, that impedes the ability of the project to go forward successfully and is not to your advantage. So I'm going to keep pushing on these with every wish for your success for a project that is done right and that serves 38 million Californians.
Well, and that's very nice of you to say, because, in fact, that's the way we look at it, too. And many members of this legislature are former members of local government. You can contemplate an EIR process on a major public project, and particularly one where there's people that are being impacted. And to contemplate an EIR on a project that goes all the way across this state through the middle of people's communities, next to their houses, next to their businesses, affecting millions of people just because of the course of activity for what we believe is the state's overall benefit, how do you mitigate and address those? That's what the environmental process is about. That's why we're spending millions and millions of dollars to focus primarily on alternatives and impacts of those alternatives and figuring out how to deal with that. And I know there'll be a quick jump to say sometimes you deal with it by increasing the cost of the project. The answer is yes, that many alternatives become costly. And we are going to look to address those costs as well. And one of the elements within the business plan is it moved from $33 million last year to $42 billion this year, and the contemplation is that's a huge jump. It is. First, the largest and most significant was the fact that we moved from a 2008 basis year on the dollar to a year of expenditure dollars. So we captured the cost of living increases and the value of money through that period. That's how the federal government wishes us to report. Therefore, we want to be consistent in that and how our plan represents that. And it represents $2 billion in additional costs of construction. But I will tell you, we will learn in every community of this state when we're engaged, there's going to be more cost of construction than we anticipated, because we are going to address issues of impact. And it's going to be difficult. And people will be happy, people will be very mad, and hopefully the overall amount of people will be glad that the system's built and addressing many of those impacts that we can. And so we're going to live within that system, but you're right, it's a tough challenge. The peer review panel that was created by this legislature, in fact, we have utilized them not for the role in which they were created, but to vet through them various elements of our reorganization, our staffing needs, and so forth. We have solicited them to participate, just by the way, as we solicited peer review of our ridership numbers when they were developed. There is an ongoing interest by the board to ensure that we do reach out and have experts in certain areas provide back that information to us. And if that is the legislature or this committee, so be it. But we also feel that we will be double checking our work throughout this entire process.
Yeah. First, I'd like to preface my remarks by saying I, too, agree that this is a much more developed business plan than was before. It's not completely meets, I think, all of our own needs to kind of understand more clearly some of these issues. Possibly it couldn't have done. And I like hearing you saying that this is going to be an ongoing process. This will not be the last business plan. So I'll leave that issue at this one. The question I have is how, and this is, I don't know how you could answer this, but I'm struggling with the difference between wishing for something and the check is in the mail. It's actually coming. I understand when you needed to have some kind of, when you understood that the cost of the project would go from in the low 30s to 40, you needed to escalate and have an escalation clause in terms of what each partner would be participating. The state being at 9 and everyone else jumping up. The question I have is to follow up on what the LAO said. How realistic? Have you had any discussions with our federal representatives and a commitment when, in fact, we receive through the gas tax only approximately $3 billion a year for all highway funds in the entire state, that we're going to get an equal amount over the next 6 years for the high-speed rail? I'm not saying that's unrealistic. What I'm saying is, how did you come to that? And has anyone in the administration or the Congress made commitments that they would move in this direction for the state? I mean, where did those numbers come from?
Well, first off, you need to tell me who in the administration or Congress can commit to doing that.
I would like.
Well,
you committed. You said it's not. You said in the next 6 years, you're going to raise between 17 and 19 billion dollars.
Sure.
Where did that come from?
And we presented it that way.
Is that a wish?
It is a hope. And
it may not be right. That may be the best way we can go now,
well,
and I'm not even saying that.
I mean,
I'm just saying, have you heard anything?
Sure. We submitted $4.7 billion worth of requests.
Right.
For
with
high-speed
already
rail.
earmarked out of $8 billion in the ARA. That was already there. We're talking about once that's
right.
off the table, Where is the, who have you heard?
But I want to put that into context. I want to put it in context in terms of an LAO's comment as to saying, why aren't you telling us a timeline when all of these things will be built?
I'm not
I
concerned
can't
about
do that because I don't know when I will get those chunks of money. And yes, we have a plan, and we will seek them and hope they fit that plan.
I'm
But
just wondering
we'll
whether we
revise that
had any
plan.
conversations.
But in fact, we have had conversation with members throughout the Department of Transportation, FRA, and certainly the Speaker of the House of Representatives, our two senators, and the
Yes.
majority of the membership of our congressional delegation about our ERA application.
That's
So
the ERA application. Do
ERA
they know another
application-
17 to 19 billion is going to be needed?
In fact, Chairman Oberstar, who I have personally met with twice in the last 12 months, and I know representative from the high-speed rail as well as the state of California have met with him multiple times. He is moving forward with his transportation bill with $50 billion set aside for high-speed rail. That is what he is seeking within that bill. Will that be realized? Will there be other stimulus money or one-time money or other programmatic money or other focused money on high-speed rail
And will
development?
California get almost half of that?
But in fact, we're not asking
19,
for...
well, 17 to 19 you're talking
Well,
about.
but we also, I mean, there is a point of anticipation when you're moving forward, as this state is, with a program that does, in fact, bring about reality to federal appropriators. When they see, in fact, that this state has made commitments, invested in its system, has $9 billion to match to the 4.7 to match to the ERA funding, would receive 4.7 as well. No other state in the nation has done that. Therefore, there is a much greater opportunity for this state when we have environmentally cleared project.
I sure hope you're right.
Well, but what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong that every project we build with this federal money over the next cycle is built with independent utility?
Right.
I hope I'm right, but if I'm wrong, we will benefit the existing systems in the Bay Area. We'll benefit the existing systems between Orange and LA County. We'll benefit service within the Central Valley. And if the federal government says we're never giving you another dollar, every one of those areas have been benefited through high-speed rail match as well as federal dollars. I don't know where that risk is, but we will continue to environmentally clear the entire project so we are prepared and ready. And that's what we have to demonstrate.
So to circle back,
Yes.
through the chair, the plan to initially construct projects with independent utility is a critical element or component of your risk management plan for the possibility that federal funds will not be forthcoming in the amounts you hope or expect.
That certainly has been demonstrated in the first level of projects we are moving forward with. Yes,
And
sir.
to go back to Mr. Crane's earlier comment, the downside of that is that the costs of those earlier projects may not be shared by a larger segment, which would kick up the costs to some extent. But you would at least have spent the money you have for improvements in projects that are worthy on a standalone basis, yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think, as far as I'm concerned, I think we've kind of aired the issue adequately as far as both the LAO and also I'll